Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and I work with a lot of individuals with attachment wounds. Today, I wanted to go over a particular characteristic or aspect or variable in a relationship that once adjusted, it can help both sides of the healing. And it's not without work from both sides. So both individuals should be changing. So I see a lot of avoidance in my practice or couples, and where the couple, one of them is an avoidant. And I notice that there's something particular that if this particular thing changes, the avoidant individual actually starts to lean in, and the other partner also starts feeling like they're also respected and loved. So before we jump in, I am not saying that you as the partner need to do the work and the avoidant is doing nothing. That is actually not what I'm saying. It's also important to realize that if your partner is not doing any work and there is no healing at all on their particular end, it may be that there's something else that you guys have to work through, because no matter what you do, if your partner is not also showing up at least a little bit, any technique that you do may not work. And so it's very important to realize when I share some of these things, I'm not saying to manipulate your partner. We want teamwork, collaborative, so that you two can have a healthy relationship and start learning to trust one another, okay? So let's talk about what that aspect is. And from my perspective, there are many, but this one today I wanted to really highlight is building self-esteem for both partners, but especially the partner that is not the avoidant partner. And so what do I mean by that, and how does that work? Well, it's very important to realize that actually building self-esteem is something that a lot of avoidant individuals want. And the reason why is typically, not all the time, but typically their partner is either anxious preoccupied or fearful avoidant. And both of those attachment styles struggle with trusting themselves, and they struggle with low self-esteem and some form of abandonment issues. Fearful avoidance can swing between the two, but typically with a fearful avoidant, they have both characteristics of anxious preoccupied and avoidant attachment. So they struggle with self-esteem, but they also struggle to trust others. Now, why is self-esteem important on both sides? Well, one thing I will mention, and if you're the avoidant partner, I think this is really important to mention. When you guys want your partners to have higher self-esteem, which is good because you want them healthy, but it's also something that you as the avoidant partner need to understand what that means. If your partner builds more self-esteem, they will be more direct, which is what you guys are wanting. They're going to probably not be as attached to the outcome of the relationship, which is also what you're wanting. But in return, they will expect respect, right? They want respect from you. They will expect more honesty and consistency. And so you as the avoidant partner, you need to show up in those areas as well, because they can't, if they're building self-esteem and you're not improving at all, there is a risk that it may prompt them to actually leave the relationship. So that's really important to realize that you as the avoidant, you have to continue to build your self-worth as well, while also leaning into the relationship and putting effort in, because you're wanting your partner to build self-esteem, which is what we're going to talk about. But it's also important to realize if they build self-esteem and you're not treating them well, they are not going to stand for that. So it's very important that you adjust as well if you are treating them to where you feel you could probably do a little bit more. Okay? So that's very important to be aware of when you're understanding and changing some of these dynamics, because relationships do change, and it's good. We want relationships to change in a healthy way, but it's important to realize what that means for both ends. Okay. So the first thing to kind of highlight among building self-esteem, it doesn't mean that you're becoming rigid. I want that to be really important. A common misconception, especially anxious preoccupied, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, I'm being as honest as I can. A lot of individuals who are anxious preoccupied, sometimes they don't know what self-esteem necessarily means. And so they think self-esteem means very firm boundaries to the point where they're almost insulting their partner or being so negative towards their partner. I'm never dating an avoidant again. They think secure attachment means that, where they don't adjust at all, where they're thinking, okay, I don't want to be a doormat anymore, so I'm not going to stand for this. If you don't text me at this time, then I don't need you anymore. They start having that type of expectation, which is not healthy either, because that's not what self-esteem is. Self-esteem means that, and it means a lot of things to a lot of people. So this is just my perspective of self-esteem. It means that you're willing to be flexible, which is why I said avoidants need to work on self-esteem as well, while still having a foundation of your limit. Anxious, preoccupied individuals, because they're so used to bending over backwards and giving people all of their time, all of their energy, and never standing up for themselves, they go the complete other way without realizing. And it takes practice. It takes practice. So don't be too hard on yourself. But it's very important that you learn, if you're anxious, preoccupied, or even fearful avoidant, and avoidant as well, that self-esteem is about being flexible without losing who you are and being able to bounce back. Self-esteem is not, I'm a hard rock, I'm a glass wall but once you punch it, it breaks. No. Self-esteem is more like a rubber band, right? You pull it and it can be pulled. There's a limit, but it can also bounce back, right? But you don't want to pull it too much because eventually it can't bounce back as much, which is why once you feel that limit, that's when you back up and say, okay, I can't do this anymore. I don't know if that made sense, but that's kind of how secure individuals are. They're not a hard rock. They're not a piece of glass. They're not a doormat. They're none of those aspects. They're flexible, they're strong, and they can bounce back when they need to be, right? And so self-esteem is just like that. It doesn't mean that you're not going to compromise for your avoidant partner. And as the avoidant partner, it doesn't mean that you're not going to lean in and show your vulnerabilities. What it means is that you're going to try and trust that somehow you yourself will work it out. And that you trust your partner enough to know, okay, my partner is here, so we're going to try and make it work together. That's what self-esteem means in this particular aspect. I hope that makes sense. So why do avoidant partners want their partner to build self-esteem? Because, honestly, I'm being honest with you, it makes them feel like they don't have to be the only one that's leaning 100% to try and fix the relationship. And I know a lot of you guys are going to get mad and say, oh my God, like avoidants never do anything. They think that we're asking for too much. That's why they want us to build self-esteem. No, that's not what it is. It's very hard for them from their perspective, especially because of the wounds they have. If you're anxious, preoccupied, for example, or anybody's anxious, preoccupied, and you're asking for reassurance frequently, avoidant individuals feel that as an imbalance because they're not asking for reassurance, and they're also feeling like maybe your reassurance is not genuine in their perspective, to which no matter how hard they try, nothing's going to fix it because it may be a wound on your part, right? It can be challenging to balance. That's why anxious, preoccupied, and avoidant, dismissive avoidant especially, is a pretty difficult relationship, and it can work, and I've seen it work, of course. But the reason why it's challenging is because you guys both have wounds in the same spot, but they're in the opposite direction. I don't even know if I explained that correctly. But basically, avoidants do things to make you feel insecure, but regardless of being with an avoidant, you're still feeling insecure about certain things, and that's okay. But reassurance, sometimes the avoidant individual may feel like, I'm giving you reassurance for something I didn't even do, and I'm okay with that, but sometimes it's overwhelming, and I start seeing you as somebody that I can't come to because I don't feel like you're sturdy enough. I'm just being honest with you. I know that's not nice to think, but it is sometimes true. And so what that means is sometimes when you need reassurance as a partner of the avoidant, sometimes try and think, is this something that I need right away? Is it something that I can hold on to, see if I can figure out myself? And if not, I will give it to my partner, and my partner and I will work together so that we can connect and they can make me feel better because it makes me feel loved. And sometimes I need that reassurance from my partner, right? So sometimes stop and think, is this reassurance necessary for this moment? It can be later. I'm not saying to not ask for reassurance. I'm just saying try and think about what you're asking for and seeing if it's worth it at this very moment, if it can be on hold, or maybe if you can work it out yourself, right? So that's one thing that's very important, which is an aspect to building self-esteem as well, okay? The next one, and I really like this one because it really helps a lot of, especially anxious, preoccupied individuals, not so much fearful avoidant, but especially anxious, preoccupied individuals. It allows them to actually, if they're struggling with depression or anxiety, a lot of these symptoms may decrease as well doing this. So this is a really nice one. And it's doing things more often without your partner where you're the one choosing that, not where you have to because your partner is doing whatever or they're not available. It's when you decide, I've had a really long day today. Today, I want to go to, I don't know, a bistro or Panera Bread or wherever you want to go for lunch, just to break up your work day, right? And just sit there. Or after work, go somewhere, restaurant or whatever, and just be by yourself, relax and say, this is time I need to decompress. I need it because my day was really difficult, regardless of my relationship, regardless of my friends, regardless of what anybody else needs of me. Today, this moment, even this hour, I'm going to sit down and spend it for me. I'm not going to worry about what anyone is thinking right now, other than myself. I need this. I'm just going to get dinner or a sandwich or whatever, and I'm going to just, be myself, right? That's really important. That increases a lot of self-esteem as well. You're not thinking about what your partner is doing or if they're pulling away or if they need you or you need to help them or whatever. You're thinking about yourself. And a lot of anxious, preoccupied individuals especially, they actually don't think about themselves enough, which is why they end up exploding and feeling like, not exploding, that was not right. Like emotionally feeling very overwhelmed, where they feel, I'm never listened to, listen to me right now, and I'm not going to adjust, and I'm really mad, and I'm starting to insult you or whatever, because I do so much and you don't even realize how much I'm doing and dealing with all the time. So anxious, preoccupied, very frustrated with avoidant individuals. And sometimes part of that, and I'm not saying it's not the avoidant who's doing it. They do it too, right? They put a lot of pressure on you guys as well. But it's also important to realize some of it is just because you guys are bending over backwards for things that maybe if you just backed up, no one would ask for it. Sometimes you do things that people are not asking for, and it's very kind of you, but you need to think about yourself, right? So that's important. The next one, and this one is dependent, but I hear this a lot in my office. A lot of avoidant individuals hope that their partner focuses a little bit more on their career or things that build their future is a better way to put it, because it doesn't necessarily have to be a career. But a lot of avoidance, why they feel this way is because they're hoping that they can have some sort of equal partnership. And I'm not saying financially. I'm saying where they both can talk about similar things. So let's say an avoidant individual is struggling with work or something difficult, like a meeting, or they have a lot of things they have to do. They feel like if you had your own career, which is not always the case, but this is where their mentality comes from, that you will kind of understand they just need to shut off for a little bit. It has nothing to do with you, because they're saying they want you to have focus on this because they care about you and they don't want you to think that it's personal. And so they hope that if you focus on your own career, you will also understand why sometimes they really are very stressed out. And of course, avoidants need more decompression time, but they feel like also they can talk to you about what's going on with their life because you'll understand that. I hope that makes sense. I feel like it was a little bit wordy, but I hope you got it. If not, you can always ask questions in the comments and I'll try to answer. The next one is speaking with more confidence. Now, this does not mean be aggressive. This does not mean shove your opinion over top somebody else's. That's not what it means. But let's just say, for example, this is a really common one, and it sounds a little silly, but I hope you still get it. A lot of individuals get really difficult, get into a little bit of a disagreement, avoidant and anxious preoccupied, when they're trying to understand how they're feeling about anything. So this is going to sound very silly, but let me give you an example of what I see. Let's say you and your partner are trying to figure out how to get to the airport, okay? So let's say you have a flight at 9 a.m. So not too early, it's probably early for some people, but it's not the earliest flight, right? But you also want to be there on time. And let's say it's a very busy airport, like one in DC or Orlando, one of those really busy airports where you have to be there like minimum 2 hours. Otherwise, like you have to be at the airport minimum 2 hours. Otherwise, you're going to miss your flight. That means that you probably sometimes have to wake up at like 5 a.m., depending on how far you are from the airport, sometimes 4 a.m., just to get to a 9 o'clock flight. If you guys are near a busy city, especially if you're far from it, but like near enough that that's the only airport near you. You guys get what I'm talking about, right? I come from an area that's a little bit more rural, but we do have a nearby city. It's about an hour away, and that's like where all the traffic is. That's where all the jobs are, whatever. But that's also where the airports are. So you got to wake up really early in my area, and I'm sure a lot of you guys can understand. And so a really big conflict is, how to prepare for the airport, what time to wake up. Do we drop the car off at, parking lot, like a separate parking lot, or do we do it at the airport parking lot to save money? Something like that. And so these disagreements, what ends up happening with an anxious, preoccupied, or sometimes fearful avoidant is they get lost in what's happening and they can't be very directive. But what ends up happening is their avoidant partner ends up pushing through and calling all the shots, and the anxious, preoccupied individual is feeling like a little bit of like almost like mini resentment about the actual moment, because they're feeling like, that's not a good idea, that's wrong, or that's right, but maybe it's better to do it this way. But they're not really directly saying it. And so the avoidant is making like, it sounds weird, but they're making like a little bit of minor mistakes that's wasting time. And the anxious preoccupied is feeling really frustrated. And I see this with even like TV channels where the anxious preoccupied is sitting there thinking, we're always watching the same thing. But they say it indirectly, but they don't realize it's indirect. And this is the same thing with like going to the airport or preparing for a long trip or cooking dinner, right? These little things where I see the anxious preoccupieds always taking the back seat, and they're sitting there like, maybe they do have something very valuable to say, and they don't say it confidently. And so speaking confidently is saying, and the reason why anxious preoccupieds do not do this is because they're afraid to make someone upset. Deep inside, they're afraid their partner will leave them if they speak like this. But basically, the best way to approach it is, let's say the avoidant individual is saying, let's wake up at, 7 a.m. or 6:30, get to the airport, and we'll see if there's a parking deck. If not, we'll go one of the, the parking lots 5 minutes away and take the bus there, and then we'll go to the airport. And the anxious preoccupied individual can say, okay, I do hear what you're saying, but to me that sounds like a lot of time that might be wasted, and I do genuinely feel like we may miss our flight. I respect that you're trying to save money, and you're also trying to get more sleep, which I like. I think what might be better is if we try to sleep a little bit earlier and we don't worry too much about the money, just because at the end of the day, we'll probably be maybe saving like $10, maybe $15 to park at a further parking lot. But I feel like that may take up maybe 30, 40 minutes of our time. We don't know, we may miss the bus. We don't know the exact intervals. So what I think might be best is if we wake up a little bit early, we drive there, we leave our car there at the airport parking lot, and then we go to the airport. I feel like I will feel less worried, and I genuinely want you to take what I'm saying at least seriously. What's your perspective of that? Because that's really what I feel, right? So that doesn't mean that you can't show your anxiety, you can't show your fears, you can't be collaborative, you can't listen to what your partner is saying, but it's just saying, I believe that we both are equal, so let's talk. Anxious preoccupied always feels like what I'm saying is not valuable enough, and no one's going to listen, right? No one's going to listen, so I'm not going to talk like I'm even going to be listened to. Whereas if you just speak, I don't really agree with what you're saying. I hear you, and we can try and meet in the middle, but I feel like what you're saying right now, I feel like we're going to miss our flight, and that will waste a lot more money and a lot more time if we miss that flight. So how about we do it like this? What's your opinion on that? What do you think? What is your way of thinking? Because this is my line of thinking. Easy, right? Well, sounds easy in a video, but try and practice that type of speaking. It doesn't, right? So that's not direct. That's not insulting. It's not saying you're so, X, Y, and Z. You don't know what you're talking about. You're going to be late to the airport. Nothing like that. Just speak from your perspective. And at the end of the day, if you miss it, you miss it, right? It's not too big of a deal, right? Well, it is a deal, but maybe not too big, right? The next one, and this is pretty much summing up what we just talked about, but I'm putting it in a separate point, is communicating what you like and what you want while still remaining flexible. This is really important for self-esteem. So I'll give an example that's a really common issue with being with an avoidant. When to get married, right? Or if you guys get married at all, okay? You can say, I do know You know, let's say the avoidant individual is like, I don't know when I want to get married. I don't know if I want to get married, etc. Or maybe if you guys have been together for a long time, they want to get married, just not now. And they can't tell you when. Maybe we'll get married. I just can't tell you. I can't speak to that. Let's say they're just shutting it off. You can say, okay, I do understand what you're saying. You know where I stand on this. At one point, I want to get married. I'm not sure, but this is how I feel right now. Again, maybe I'll change my mind. I don't think so, though. I do want to get married one day, but I do also understand that it's, it's a tricky topic for you. And I know you've had experience as to why maybe marriage is not on the forefront of your mind, but you know where I stand. And as long as you know where I stand and we're willing to be flexible in other ways, I'm willing to be flexible about the time frame as well. I just want you to understand how I feel and why marriage is important to me. And I don't want this to be a discussion that we never talk about again. I want us to be able to bring up talking about marriage throughout our relationship. I want that to be at least part of our communication. What do you think? Right? So you didn't let go of everything you wanted, right? You're just being flexible while still subconsciously reinforcing your partner to also be flexible. And I'm not saying it's only on you. Avoidant individuals, like I had mentioned, you have to be more consistent. You have to be more trustworthy. Otherwise, your partner is not going to feel that their self-esteem is improving because you're crushing their self-esteem. So you have to give them a safe space, right? So both of you guys remain flexible, really important. So why does building your self-esteem in the way that I had kind of elaborated in this video, why does that lead to change? Because avoidant individuals are really big on respect, and it goes both ways. By you having self-esteem and being flexible and being confident and focusing on other aspects that's not just them, not only do you put less emphasis on them changing and them putting whatever they have to for the relationship, which they know they do have to. And, if they're a good person and they're healing and they do care about you, eventually they'll get there. But it also allows them to understand that you do like them for who you are and you're willing to be flexible. And when you're confident and you communicate well, they can hear you better because they communicate that way often. And so if you're being a little bit indirect or you're pouting or you're pulling away emotionally and you're shutting down to try and give them a message, they have no idea what that means. And that's very frustrating to them. And if they feel very frustrated in a relationship, they may leave the relationship even if they care about you because they don't know what else to do. They feel a little trapped and they feel confused. So by building your self-esteem, they feel more wanting this relationship, more worthy of wanting to love you, wanting to be loved by you. And by doing this, avoidant individuals will also be prompted by some of these behaviors and will lead to change. And as an avoidant individual, if you start leaning in and giving more love and attention and care to your partner, that will prompt them to build their self-esteem and give you what you're looking for as well. Relationships work both ways, okay? So this video, summarizing it in general, is once an individual build their self-esteem, both sides, but I'm talking about the partner, particularly this video, both of you guys can lead to more connecting relationships. It will help the avoidant heal. It will help the avoidant open up to love. So I hope this makes sense. I appreciate you guys watching. Please subscribe, like, and I'll see you in the next one.